pretend to try to teach you to write. I'm not the person to do that. We have faculty members who do it. I'm actually the Associate Dean in the College of Grad Studies, and I teach in the counseling department. I teach mostly doctoral courses in the counseling department. We have excellent writing teachers here. I'm just not a writing teacher. I'm a heck of an editor, but I'm not a writing teacher. So, there we go. As we go through, I will be watching the chat as well, since Sophia is able to project for me. So if you have questions as we go on, feel free to write them in the chat, or if you have comments. And if it fits there, I'll respond then. But we're also going to try to save a little bit of time for the end so that we make sure we have everybody's questions addressed. Good? We're good? I can only see about 5 of you at a time. So, Sophia, would you go to the next slide? So what we want to do is help you understand more about the writing expectations at grad level. We want to help you begin to think about and identify your own writing strategies currently and be aware of resources for expanding them. We want to help you understand written communication within an academic environment and identify university resources that are available, because there are a lot of them here, both online and face-to-face, that can be really helpful to you in your writing endeavors. Next. And this is why it matters. One of the biggest concerns that grad students express when they come back to school, especially if they've been out of the workforce, not just out of school, but out of the workforce, is a lack of confidence about writing. They also don't have a lot of time. A lot of our grad students, a lot of them, probably the majority, are doing dual roles. They're doing the rest of their lives at the same time they're going to grad school. So they're working, they're graduate assistants, they are parents, they're taking care of parents, they're doing all sorts of things besides just going to school. They also don't have a lot of skill in utilizing the scholarly resources available to them. Those are the things they say. It's a critical skill in business and industry. For that reason, often if we have people coming into school who've been in the business world for a while, they're not as intimidated by writing because they've been writing professionally, maybe not academically, but professionally for quite a while. And a lot of times, it's easy to think about writing and writing assignments as just sort of a box to check off, whether that's an assignment submission or a thesis or a dissertation completion, but people don't think about what it takes as much, or don't know how to think about what it takes to develop good writing skills. The other thing is that grad faculty have higher expectations for writing of their grad students than people have for their undergrad students. Okay? So, first I want to tell you there aren't any official rules. I've looked around online quite a bit. I haven't found any resources that can tell me this is definitively the difference between graduate and undergraduate writing. So obviously it's going to be hard for people to understand. One thing that is different is the purpose of writing. It's more than just writing to fulfill an assignment, although students do that. I did that. I don't think that's ever going to stop, but we also try to write for broader relevance than just a submission to get a grade on assignment. A lot of times, nearly all the time, graduate school writing requires that you summarize and you synthesize information. You don't rely as much on direct quotes. If I get a paper submitted that's one direct quote after another, the paper's going back to the student for revision. There's more emphasis on showing similarities and differences in the scholarly conversation that's going on. It's not just reporting this guy said this and that woman said that. There's synthesizing of information. Another thing that is true is that the vocabulary and formatting are specific to your discipline. Counselors, counseling students, counseling professors, counseling authors write in a particular way. If you go pick up a science and nature journal, you're going to read a very different kind of writing. Like I said, everything from vocabulary to to formatting are different. Your writing in grad school needs to conform to the conventions of your discipline. Does that make sense to everybody? A math thesis or a math dissertation, for example, looks really, really, really different than a thesis or a dissertation that comes out of English or counseling or psychology. They look really different. And the further you go, don't let this scare you, but the further, because it really doesn't need to, but the further you go in some ways, the more complex the writing becomes. The good news is you're writing in your discipline. You're writing in something you've chosen to specialize in. Next. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about what faculty members expect. One of the things to know, if you haven't already figured it out, is that professor-student relationships are often different with master's and doctoral students with their faculty than it was undergrad students and their faculty. There's generally fewer students in a class. The part of what the professor is doing is mentoring students into a particular discipline or a particular field. There may be more one-on-one time, more small group time with the faculty member. There may be more one-on-one and small group time with your peers as well. With that said, you need to know that what you can expect from your instructors is different than what you expected from your undergraduate experience. In things like the amount of detail and step-by-step instructions. For example, one of the questions I get all the time, I get it from master's students, I get it from doctoral students. If there's a paper assigned, somebody's going to ask me how many pages. At least one person is going to ask me how many pages. And my response is cover the topic. Seriously, and it drives some students crazy. Now, there are a lot of faculty who will give you page numbers, or at least minimum page numbers. But then there are a lot like me who really aren't invested in the page numbers, and you don't get more credit for writing more pages. And some of you will write pretty concisely so that you don't need as many words to say the same thing. I tend to be wordy, which you'll no doubt notice in this presentation, but I do it in papers, in memos, in emails I send. I'm wordy, so it takes me longer. You also may notice the amount of feedback differs. Some depending on what the topic is, you may get very, very specific and detailed feedback, or you may get something like rewrite or redo or no or well done, but without any information about what's well done. There's also an expectation that students will correct their own work, more so than at the undergraduate level, where faculty members are more likely to do more correction. With that said, remember that all your faculty members are going to be different, even in the same discipline. So where I don't assign page numbers, sometimes a minimum if I've seen issues with people making it too short in the past where they don't cover the material. There are people in my department teaching the same level of students I teach who always skip a page, number of pages. No less than 10 pages, no more than 15, that sort of thing. So everybody's different. Next. Okay. So some of the things that I want to point out that's just sort of expected. There's this book, Eats, Shoots, and Leaves by Truss. It's old now. It's one of my favorite grammar kind of, and well, mechanics really kind of books because of that title. And it's written in a funny way. But a reasonable command of grammar and mechanics of writing is just expected in grad school. That doesn't mean that people won't help you, because the faculty will. And the faculty here, unlike some places I've gone to school, is very invested in helping students learn the skills they need to be successful. But some amount of basic grammar and mechanics is a baseline in most disciplines. It's not the essence of academic writing, but it can have an impact on how your work is seen. And so if you make a lot of grammar mistakes or a lot of mechanics style mistakes, then it can have an impact on how your work is seen. If something is not organized well, if I have to fight to figure out what the writer is trying to say, then that can shade how I see the material, and I may get pickier. And I really try not to do that, and I usually grade twice to make sure that I don't do that. But it impacts how the work is viewed. Grammar and mechanics matter not only in academic writing, but also in professional writing. You'll see different things about this, but essentially grammar has to do with how you put words together to make sentences and to form paragraphs. And if you think back to your public school days, you may remember things about topic sentences and then moving from the topic sentence to explain that, and then you have another topic sentence for your next paragraph. Some of that has to do with the whole grammar thing. The mechanics is more like the punctuation, capitalizing what needs to be capitalized, spelling, formatting. Like in grad school, in my discipline, everything is double spaced. Everything is written in Times New Roman, even though we mostly don't find that to be our favorite font. Nonetheless, that's how it's done. 12 point, I would add. So there's an expectation in my discipline that that's how your papers are going to look. It'll be different elsewhere. Spelling, when people give us papers and the spell check has obviously indicated that a word is misspelled and a person hasn't fixed it, then that might get a raised eyebrow from your faculty member. So you want to be sure that you're paying enough attention to that. The reason is not just about being picky, it's that grammar and mechanics, when done well, help you to have better clarity in your writing. An example of that is the title of this slide versus Eat Shoots and Leaves, which brings up pandas, right? If you think about Eat Shoots and Leaves with no commas, does that make you think of pandas? I hope. Yes? I can't see everybody, so thank you for smiling, Alex, and and Perry, I can tell that worked. So, next slide. That can sound kind of grim, I know, because your major focus is not, like I said, mechanics and grammar. It's more about writing in a way that's clear. And one of the things to consider is what strategies you use in your writing. That has to do with how you write. And in order to get better at writing, it really helps to think about how you write and how you can improve or expand your writing strategies. I'll give you an example. I was always taught in public school and in undergrad, I was taught this all the way through, that I should start a paper by making an outline. I don't do that. I don't do that to this day. I did it when I had to and had to turn them in, but that's not the way my mind works best. That's not the way I write best. For other people, it's exactly the best thing to do. I saw someone has big whiteboards behind their desk. I love whiteboards. I make notes on whiteboards and I make them in different colors, and I have lines that go from hither to yon when I'm writing. I also have pads of paper and sticky notes that I do that with, that I arrange and rearrange. And for me, I almost write a paper in my head, like organizationally, before I put it on paper. And mostly that works. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always work because I can procrastinate a lot when I do that, so that I never get something finished. So it's another strategy is setting deadlines. And I set deadlines starting with when it's due and then backing it up by days or weeks, depending on the time. It's different for different things I'm working on. What about you? What strategies do you use when you write? You can type it in, or you can just think about it. What's worked for you when you needed to get something written, wanted to get something written? Well, have we got a deal for you? Remind us to talk at the end about the writing workshops we have. Because one of the things that happens there is that, not workshop like this, is that people from the Writing Center are available to help you think about strategies for writing. Do think about what's worked for you. Think about things you've tried that didn't work for you. Like I said, outlines don't work for me very well. Almost never, because my brain just doesn't. Oh, bullets, yes, bullets. Rough drafts, free writing. Edit, edit, edit. Yes, all of those things. Rough drafts are pretty essential for me too. And bullets. I like bullets a lot. Okay. Um, so knowing what works for you, knowing what hasn't worked for you, and then figuring out strategies you may want to play with and see if they work better sometimes for you than other times. One strategy is not likely to work all the time or for all kinds of assignments. So the earlier in your program you can identify additional strategies, the more help it's likely to be for you. Um, Looking at my calendar, for example, can drive people crazy because there's so many different colors in it. And I have blocks of time that are different colors. Looking at my whiteboard in my office can do the same thing. But it works for me for a number of reasons. And I have to change the colors periodically or it gets stale and I no longer see it. That's just me. Next. Some general tips about writing. It's really important to read the syllabus instructions for any writing assignment. And often faculty members will put rubrics in the syllabus that tell you exactly how they're going to grade. Tells you what a great score will take, what an A or an excellent score will take. Tells you what something that's not going to pass muster will have in it. Again, the detail in those varies from instructor to instructor, but you really want to make sure you pay attention to the instructions and rubrics if they're included. I can tell you that your faculty members will love you if you read the instructions before you ask the question, because if it's already plainly there in the syllabus and you're asking them to tell you what's already in the syllabus, then you're likely to get an answer like, did you read the syllabus? No. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't ask about something in the syllabus. Sometimes I write things in the syllabus that I think are as clear as they can be, but they're not clear necessarily to a student or to some students. And it's absolutely fine for people to ask for clarification for me. If your discipline uses a style guide, use that, follow that. For my discipline, it's APA, style guide. That's what we use. That's not true for all colleges or for all programs or all departments. It's not true even within a particular college. Psychology, for example, uses APA. Other programs in liberal arts do not use APA. They use other style guides. It's important to know what you're supposed to use. And that includes everything from your cover page to the kinds of headings you have, if you have headings, whether you have running heads at the top, where your page numbers go, how the citations are listed. Use what your discipline tells you to use. Okay? And be clear about the kind of writing that's assigned. A research paper or a literature review will look one way. A reflective paper is something else altogether. It doesn't have necessarily those same kinds of, it's not likely to have citations. It's not necessarily going to have headings, because a reflective paper is about you thinking about how you're reacting to material or things that are brought up for you or things that you're thinking about. And those are different than demonstrations of learning, like when you write an essay. Know the purpose of your writing. I also want to tell you, I may have written it on another slide, but I'll tell you now in case I didn't. Depending on what you're writing, your faculty member may not care about the style guide. If somebody's writing a lit review or a paper for me, then using the APA style guide is just what has to be. It always is. When I used to teach the diagnosis class, it had mounds and mounds of information. That was not important. And when people had exams, even though they were out of class exams, bullets were fine, lists were fine, anything out of the diagnostic and statistical manual was fine, and I didn't need a formal citation for every one of those things. But I told students that. Okay? So it was different. Make sure you know what your professor is wanting. Okay. This will be fun. You can add this into your schedule. Make writing regular. Set a time for it. Use a calendar. I assume most of you probably use a calendar already. I don't know how you are going to manage your school and your life, the rest of your life, without one, but make it a habit to set aside time for writing. I'm holding my dog so that he doesn't run around and bark, and he's trying to tap my keyboard. I'm just telling you, that's part of what you're seeing here. And seek feedback. Get people to read your writing. And not just your faculty member. One of the things that is really helpful to do is get somebody outside of your discipline to read something, because it can look really, really clear to you. But when somebody who's not all that familiar with your field reads it, it may be really, really muddy. And one of the things all of us with grad degrees are expected to do now more than ever is communicate our knowledge with the broader world, not just with each other in our own little environments, but communicate what we know. So have people outside your field read it. If your sister-in-law is willing to do that and is interested in all kinds of things, and you can get her to sit down and read your 10-page paper just to see if it makes sense to her, great. You're not asking her to edit it or to judge the content. You're just wanting to know if it makes sense, if it flows. Get peers in your program to read. Most of the students in my program do that for each other. They read each other's papers, they give each other feedback, and people are invested in each other's success. So it's not unusual to have peers who will read. It's not unusual to have that be an assignment from a faculty member, by the way, at least in some disciplines, to review somebody else's paper, give feedback. And by the way, I want to see the feedback you get, because I want to see if you're able to give feedback that is helpful. Get feedback from people in the Writing Center. There are people over there who will help you with very specific facets of writing. They don't write your paper for you, but if you tell them that you would like them to read for grammar, they'll do that, and they will help you figure out how to get better at that. If you tell them you would like them to read for how you're making transitions or for logic or for flow, they will do that, and they will make suggestions about how to change some things around and how to get better at doing that. It's what they live for. They love that stuff, and they're good at it, and they're very user friendly. They like students. You can also talk to your faculty advisor or your instructor if you're having trouble. I'm sure that I'm not the only person who has had someone ask, "Hey, Dr. Oliver, would you look at this and tell me if I'm on the right track?" Sure, I'll do that. You bet. You get me that with enough lead time that I can actually read it and give you some feedback, I will absolutely do that for you. And a lot of faculty members will do that. Finish early enough with your paper so that you can proofread it and edit it more than once. Somebody wrote edit, edit, edit. Yes, that. Edit, edit, edit. Use software, use the functions of your software. If you use Word, for example, use the various functions in your software programs that help you do some of that. Do know they're not always right. So it's ultimately up to you, but a lot of times it is right. And keep in mind that revision is a good thing. Sometimes students think they have failed or done a bad job or haven't done it right if they have to revise. Revision's a good thing. One of the best, and this is a little different from where you are right now, but one of the best pieces of feedback I ever got was a review of a journal article another professor and I wrote. And the reviewer had, I don't know, 2 pages, single spaced notes. Like, oh my gosh, there's something that says too quiet that's popping up on the bottom. And I don't know why. I'm going to let it. It was some of the best, most useful feedback, though, because of the way of what the reviewer was presenting. It was very precise, very tailored to what we were writing about. We didn't accept all the feedback, but we accepted a lot of it and made the article so much better for that. So don't think that revisions are a bad thing. They're not. Next. Okay. We ready to go on? We good to go on? Okay. Let me talk a little bit about writing a paper. One of the most essential things you can do is to structure your paper so that the flow is organized and clear. If it's not clear, then obviously your reader, in this case your instructor, is not going to be able to tell necessarily what you're trying to say. And you may know way more than what I can tell you know by reading the paper because it's just not organized or flowing in a way that I can easily tell that you know what you know. In my program, we have a lot of, well, yeah, we usually have a fair number of international students or people for whom English is a second, third, or fourth language, you know, and the conventions of writing are different. And so in their maybe first and second language. And so sometimes somebody coming in and talking me through what they're trying to say helps me give them feedback about how to make it more English friendly, if you will. And it also lets me know that they understand what they're talking about, which is the most critical thing. I just can't tell from the paper. So try to be sure that your flow is organized. And generally, you're going to either be moving from the broad, the real broad, down to the more specific and detailed ideas, or you're going to move from the narrow and broaden it out. What's confusing is if you switch back and forth between the two in the same paper. That's really confusing. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Okay. Try to connect your ideas through the paper rather than jumping from topic A straight into topic B. Have some kind of transitional thing so that we can follow the logic of what you're talking about. You're talking about blue skies, and then you're talking about green earth. Give me a transition. How are these two things connected? When you have terms that are particular to your field or to a topic, you may want to define them. Or if you're writing a paper and some scholars use the term one way and some scholars use it another way, be sure you define that so that you're not using the same word in 2 or 3 different ways, but you're not telling us why. And give your sources of information. Avoid casual language in your paper. It needs to be your professional voice. And avoid cliches. Everybody good with that? Yeah. Sometimes we communicate so much, or many of us do so much via social media, and we text and we tweet and we do real short form communication, and we have short ways of saying big ideas. That's not the best way to communicate in a paper, in an academic paper. So avoid cliches and cite everything. Most of us would rather see people oversight than undercite, most us being faculty. One of the things that can happen is unintended plagiarism because people don't realize they're plagiarizing, or they're pulling things from, we're all online all the time, and we use the library online, and we find resources online, but then we forget that that's somebody else's material, or we don't give credit for that. It all needs to be cited. It's not unusual for there to be notes in the margins of a paper that says who says or cite. Plagiarism is a fairly serious issue in most colleges and universities, and like I said, a lot of times it's unintended. People aren't trying to steal other people's idea or other people's work. But they don't understand how to do it differently. So if you're a person who uses note cards or some electronic version thereof, for example, to keep ideas for your paper, be sure you put the citations for your material in with your notes so you can get back to the source easily, for example. And follow the directions. If the instructions say to compare and contrast, then compare and contrast. We do notice, and if you don't answer the question asked, you are, even if whatever you decide to respond to is brilliant, you're likely not to make the grade that you're hoping for. And it's not all about grades, but for most grad students, the grades matter. You know, they care about doing well. Um, and we notice it's fine for interviewing, and it's not unusual to be told to answer the question you want to answer and not necessarily the question that was asked, but in a paper, make sure you follow the directions. And that means making sure that also that you answer all the parts that you may be directed to respond to. Yes? Okay. Um, it's not easy to write clearly. You want a goal statement or a purpose statement or something of that ilk early in the paper. And if there are concrete examples you can use and it's appropriate for what you're doing, use them. If you're like me and tend towards wordiness, cut. Write it all and then cut where you need to. I can write a sentence that runs on for 3 type lines. It's not hard for me to do. It's not the best way for me to write, however, and so I need to go back and clean that up. People can get lost in that or just get a headache from trying to read it. I do stream of consciousness stuff if I'm not careful, and I need to stay on point. Add structure with headings and subheadings, especially in longer papers. It can really help your reader follow what you're doing. And be consistent in how you're going to do it. If you tell me early on that you're going to discuss, like I said, blue, red, and yellow, then do so and do it in that order. Or if that order doesn't work, then go back and change the top end of it because you've set an expectation there. And again, people can get lost. We've talked a bit about using transitional phrases. What we didn't talk about is using them correctly. Sometimes people say however, for example, when there's no however there. They're just looking for a connecting word, and however is used a lot, so they put it. But sentence 2 is in no way related to sentence 1, or not as a result of sentence 1. Same thing for in some, well, or in contrast to. You use those things when it's really a summation or it's really in contrast to. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Keep your sentence construction simple, 1 or 2 ideas, and have someone else read your work who hasn't been involved in it. And ask them what they understand from reading the paper. Are they coming away with what you want them to? I know I'm moving quickly, but I want to make sure that I'm hitting some of these things. Oh, Jiminy Christmas, we're running late, sorry. It's really common for students, by the way, and I'm going to shift to professional communication. It's common for students, including grad students, to email in much the same way they text. And that is, they're really brief and really informal. And that's kind of the standard. And again, this may be more true of students who haven't been out in the professional workforce. Many professors really don't like that, and they don't want that kind of informality, and may see emails closer to being more closely related to letters than to text. They're a little more formal, more thorough and clear. Grammar and mechanics are included. both informal and formal writing is fine, but it's important to know which approach fits who you're writing to and why you're writing. I'm pretty casual. I don't mind getting an email that starts off with, "Hey, Dr. Oliver." I know professors who don't like that at all. They want Dr. Oliver or Dear Dr. Oliver or something like that, rather than sounding like we talk. "Hey, Dr. Oliver." Doesn't bother me. It bothers other people a lot. It's always wiser to at least start with a little more formal approach than being overly casual and overly familiar until you know that faculty member and how they respond. Some of that you may be able to tell in how they respond back to you. It's always appropriate to be relational. We're humans, all of us, the faculty, the students, the staff, we're all human. We don't need to communicate like we're robots. Just a little touch more formality at least in the beginning, till you know your faculty, may um, be better in the long run for you. The other thing that I always want to keep in mind when I'm communicating online in the university is that that's not really private. I mean, it's a private email between whoever emails me and whoever the exchange is between, but it's also not. The university can pull that anytime, anytime. They don't go randomly looking through our emails, by the way. But if an issue were to ever come up, I mean, it's like using your email, your work email. It's available because this is our work email. Next, use your calendar account. We're supposed to communicate with students, we the faculty and staff, through their Islander accounts. And it's better if you do the same. When you write your email, if you're requesting a meeting or a letter of recommendation or some other kind of agreed upon topic, say so. Be sure you put a subject line that's clear and accurate. Use your full name. There may be 17 Marys this professor has, so put your full name, why you're writing. You can follow up and the name of the class if it's a specific class, because we have a lot of faculty here who teach 3, maybe 4 classes every semester, and they may be and they may be all in some kind of literature, for example, and they need a clue about what we're talking about. So that really helps people. It's okay to follow up if you don't hear back, but give people time. Most professors, well, I can't say most, many professors on this campus will have something in their syllabus about I will respond generally within 48 hours or within 72 hours or something like that. So give them that time and don't count the weekend as part of that time. I mean, if it's an urgent, put it in your subject line. I personally ask students to nag me, by the way, gently and respectfully, if I don't respond within a certain period of time, because if I don't, then I've lost, it's gone too far down in the email stack. Here's what you don't do. You don't email your professor and say, Dr. Oliver, what course do I have you for? I mean, with me, it would be okay. I generally only teach 1 course a semester, but I would still really question why somebody would need to ask me that. I alluded to this earlier. Don't ask them for information that is in the syllabus. Look first, and then you can ask for clarification. Always smart. You've heard this before, I'm sure. Don't write an email, at least don't send an email when you're really angry and upset. Don't threaten your professor. It doesn't help. Um, and while a lot of professors prefer a formal and more akin to letter style, they don't want most professors don't want an excessively long and complicated email. Consider a phone conversation since we're distancing, or a face-to-face conversation instead if it's complicated. Um, and don't assume a casual or social tone unless it's negotiated or established. You don't have to have can we be more informal? Yes, yes, kind of agreement. But you will probably be able to tell in fairly short order with your faculty member if that's okay. Yes. Other formats I want to mention, because they do exist. We have all kinds of communication avenues in our online course platforms. There's, of course, Blackboard Mail, and it's an email function through your Blackboard. There's also group communication possibilities in your course that your faculty member may set up for you. Bear in mind that the faculty can see that. You want to be respectful to one another when you're there anyway. But that kind of communication is likely to be much less formal. There are discussion threads used quite often. Those may be much less formal. Um, you can send memos, and memo formatting is pretty standard. You do want to be a little more professional and more formal there. You can also send letters, and you can send letters as an attachment. If you do send letters, use a business format, a business letter format, with that kind of professional and formal tone. Next. Okay. Early on, I had a slide about what faculty members expect. I've been through all of this stuff here and telling you things that I hope will be helpful to you to keep in mind as you write. But even regarding email and other kind of communications with your professors, remember this: we're all different, even within the same programs. And what is just fine, and not only fine, maybe preference for one faculty member may not be the same with another. So if you're accustomed to emailing and talking with me, and I have a pretty informal way of doing that, and then you go across campus and you talk to somebody who is much more formal in their tone and demeanor, you're gonna miss each other as you try to communicate. So just keep that in mind. Just like everybody in your family communicates different or has different preferences, so do all the faculty. And the writing center, you'll find all kinds of things. And there's a slide in here that you may want to reference at some point. And that's it. Can you get us out? Thank you. So we're about out of time. I'm sorry about that. Do you have questions or things you want to bring up? Thank you. I love those little things. Somebody should have never shown those to me because I want to put them in everything now. I obviously come out of an education background. Okay. Um, lem- Sophia, would you say a word about um, the writing room we have? I want you to hear about this real quickly because it's a joint endeavor. Thank you, Jenny. College of Grad Studies has with the Writing Center. You want to just say a word about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So our virtual writing room is a new experience that we started last semester, and it's sponsored by the Writing Center. So if any of you have ever used the Writing Center before, you know that they have really awesome trained Writing Center consultants that can help you as you journey through a paper, a thesis, or dissertation, kind of whatever it is that you're working on. And what we've done is we've collaborated with them to offer several virtual writing rooms throughout the semester. And so Dr. Oliver talked a little bit about setting aside time. And I am a grad student. I also work full time. So setting aside time can be hard. You think about all the other things that you have to get done. And I don't have any kids. I have a dog. But if you have kids or other obligations outside of work and school, it can also be even more difficult to set aside that time. So the virtual writing room is really designated time for you to make that time for yourself to write and work on whatever it is that you have in front of you. And our virtual writing rooms, they last 2 hours. So it's 2 hours of that designated writing time. We host them on Wednesday evenings, and we actually have one coming up on Wednesday. So maybe you just started and your program, or you're in a new semester and you're starting to work on something. You can join us on Wednesday. And we also host them on Sundays from 4 to 6. So I know a lot of grad students kind of find themselves working on homework on Sunday late afternoon as you prepare for the week. So it's really great, and I think the best part about it is the collaboration that we have with the Writing Center. So you'll join us in the virtual writing room. You can turn your cameras on, you can leave them off, but it's really all about that accountability. You're really putting yourself in that space where you can work on whatever it is you're working on. If you get stuck, you need assistance, we actually have Writing Center consultants there with us. So you just let one of us know, and we'll actually put you in a virtual breakout room with one of them for 15 to 20 minutes so they can consult with you on your paper, whatever it is that you're working on. So they're really awesome, and I'll put the link to see all the sessions that we have. You can also look at kind of the flow of the writing room. We start with a really quick to get the juices flowing is what we call it. It takes about 10 minutes to kind of get into that space. And then from there, we kind of set you loose. You work on whatever it is, and then you let us know if you need assistance. So in the chat, I put the link to all of the dates that we're offering in the spring semester. So you can RSVP, let us know that you're coming, and we're happy to have you.
You can also just go to grow.camucc.edu and you'll find it there as well. If it's easier for you to just, there will always be a list of workshops coming up in events.
Yeah,
at
and
grow.camucc.edu.
And all of you are going to receive an email after this session with a quick evaluation. If you could just let us know how we did today. The virtual platform is still kind of new to us, so we're still trying to make sure we can provide the best, workshops for our students. And I also put a link to our workshop page, so you'll have access to that. You can see all the workshops coming up, and you can also see our virtual writing room webpage as well. Dr. Oliver, did you have anything else you'd like to mention or talk about? Or does anybody have any questions?
I'm just always surprised how fast it goes. I always think there's going to be time. Oh, well.
Well, if you don't have any questions, I'll stay on for a little bit. So if you have questions about any of our workshops or any of our virtual writing rooms, I'm happy to answer those for you today. The recording of this session and the PowerPoint will be up on our website shortly, probably tomorrow morning, so you can always go back and review. But thank you so much for joining us, and if you could please fill out the evaluation to let us know how we did, we really appreciate your feedback. But I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Call us if you have a problem.